Christmas time is upon us. I wish everyone a very happy holiday. And the gift from chucking darts to our loyal listenership is the first episode chronicling the 2026 draft class. Welcome to Chucking Darts, a podcast of informed, rigorous, reckless, harmless, speculative, and fun predictions about the game we love. You can call me Chuck. This is episode number 235. Episode number 234 was a couple weeks back with Sam Ferris, who's at Draft Dummies. That was a what is normally an off-season episode when we've had time to do it, which is a 3-year redraft. What we did basically was we took the draft classes from 2023, 2024, and this current rookie class that's playing so well, 2025, and we alternated, but ranked prospects up to 21. So the idea there is to take as opposed, it's fun to do, number one, kind of a gimmick, but it's my gimmick. And it's fun to see what sort of an average top 7 return in a draft class looks like. That's sort of the greater point of the exercise, is to see what sorts of players keep ending up returning that level of value, what that level of value means, what's a fair expectation for picking that high in the draft. And it was fun. It had plenty of debate, disagreement, but a good time. So please check that out. This episode, though, is about the 2026 draft class, headlined by Cam Boozer, Darren Peterson, AJ Dybansa. But today, specifically, we're going to be looking at the ACC, home to Duke, North Carolina, Louisville, NC State, and the rest. Because, number one, my guest is, in my opinion, the foremost ACC media personality in the world. I'll set that as a very high, very, very high expectation, very high bar for him to clear, but he always does. And secondly, this is probably as loaded as the conference has been with NBA talent this decade, I would say. So there's a lot to get to, a lot to kick off, but the author of Split the Action on Substack, the host of the BuzzBeat podcast, all things North Carolina hoops especially, but ACC as a whole. Brian Geisinger, welcome back. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well. Happy holidays, and thanks for having me back on. I appreciate the very kind introduction on my way in tonight.
Yeah, of course. What am I going to say? He's okay. He's not bad.
Yeah,
We
he's
have a good time when
decent.
we chat.
Yeah. That would be, you know what? That would be I would appreciate that as well. That would be still some of the nicest things that anyone has said to me today. So I would still take the compliment where I could
Oh,
get it. Yeah.
I hope your holiday season is going well, Brian. It seemed from our
Likewise.
our off the record chat that all things in Geisinger land are good, so I'm hoping so.
Yep. Yeah. Enjoying it. I mean, it's been just trying to watch and chart as many and clip as many games and prospects as possible. So, kind of ready for a little bit downtime around the holidays, fewer games the next week or so, and that'll allow me to sort of catch up on some backlog too. So
Yeah.
it's a good time. Eye of the storm. I feel like for the college hoop season is right now.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I like because you do so much coverage of the college hoop season during the season and not just from a draft perspective. To me, there's like four eyes of the draft cycle storm. This is certainly one of them, but
Hmm.
it's just, you just jump from one to the other. You'll
Yeah.
get me around conference tournament season. I'll be like, oh, this is really the eye of the storm. There's this break as we rev up for conference tournaments. And
Hmm.
then there's another 3 months, between
Yeah.
the actual end of the
Yeah.
season and the lottery. So,
Yeah.
all right, and the draft. So, okay. 2026 draft, ACC, the maligned in previous years conference, which seems like they have come back with a financial vengeance across the league to make sure that they are loud and proud. And the early returns are very encouraging. Some good signature wins in these sort of cross conference matchups. And any discussion about the ACC and about the NBA draft is going to start with Duke. You and I had a couple, I thought, really good, fun, productive discussions about Cooper Flag, Kon Knueppel, and Kaman Malawach. the last cycle that I think
Hmm.
hold up very well. And the, I guess the cast for Duke this year is Cam Boozer, Patrick Ngongba, maybe Isaiah Evans, probably some Dame Sar fans out there.
Hmm.
But we're going to start there, and we're going to start with Mr. Boozer, who was probably, between him and Peterson, the most ballyhooed prospect, the most hype prospect. Boozer certainly had the more storied pre-college career because his pre-college career was as airtight and as statistically, um, substantive, statistically regarded as, any that's been charted, certainly during this modern analytic age. Obviously, the son of Carlos Boozer, he's averaging over 23 and I think averaging a double-double, if I'm not mistaken. And Duke has been good, very, very good. I will start by just saying Cam is obviously excellent. When I did my deep dive into the games that I've watched, I came away a little less enthusiastic than maybe I was expecting to be, but I don't want to steamroll with my framework first. So I want you to talk about what you've seen out of him, his strengths, his weaknesses, and how Duke is utilizing him. So what have you got?
Yeah, as far as like the strengths go, I think the shooting touch to every level of the court in the in
Hmm.
the in the half court. I think of the court mapping and processing skills that he has, his ability to read, anticipate, to sort of like see coverages, see rotations ahead of time, from different spots on the floor, different uses, different usage concepts. Very good in general. Like guy who can really throw his strength around in the post and get on the glass on both sides of the court. The open floor passing, the sort of the hit aheads, the outlets, very fun. And I do think something that is helping to drive Duke's pace and sort of like this is the fastest team that John Shire has ever coached. And I think there's some sort of like top down philosophical changes that are producing that. But I also think having Cam and Caden Boozer sort of like pushing the pace has been a key piece as well. So just like the influence on the transition offense and on Duke's pace, I think have been significant. Um, and so those are sort of like the sort of I think like the high level sort of like strengths of his game. And as far as like the ways he's being used, deployed, Duke has found a bunch of different ways to kind of get him in the action. They've
Hmm.
really a year ago, Chuck, we talked about how Duke had sort of like tailored this new 5-out offense around Cooper Flag. And they're it looks different because Cooper and Cam are different players with different strengths and weaknesses. But
Hmm.
one, you are seeing some of the same exact uses that you would see, like some of the ways that they would post up Cooper last season. It's the exact same actions for Cam. Some of the inverted pick and roll with Cooper last year, exact same stuff with Cam this year. But they really have tailored this 5-out offense to him. And I feel like he's used in a few different ways. There's a low post component to his game, which is both like, cross screen him to the block, throw it to him, play out of it. So if you get two on the ball, he's great. I think maybe the Michigan State game, he had some issues sort of like reading the Jeremy Fears, where is he? Is he coming on the double team? Is he not? I thought his passing against the extra defensive attention that Texas Tech sent at him, over the weekend was not perfect, but some when they were bringing the double team from one pass away, he was making great reads off that, punishing defenses with that. They look to get him involved in the high-low game. They will look to have him run the rim in secondary action to kind of get some deep post position too, and Pat Gongba can come on the trail and they can look to get high-low. They use him as an off-ball mover, coming off down screens, coming off flare screens, and he's used as a pick and roll ball handler, either running 4 or 5 action with Pat Gongba or Malik Brown, or what has sort of become like a go-to late game offense for them, the game winner against Florida what brought them home down the stretch on the road against Michigan State. Some of their key possessions in the Thanksgiving win over Arkansas were this inverted pick and roll that he's running primarily with Isaiah Evans, like occasionally Nick Kamenia, occasionally Caleb Foster, but Evans as sort of like the off-ball roving quick trigger shooter really does make for like the ideal screen partner in
Hmm.
these actions. I think that stuff has been it's been very good. The numbers for it after the Michigan State game, especially, were like my own sort of like hand charted data was very good with it. And I think those kinds of actions help sort of like offset some of the like athletic limitations of Boozer, this sort of like first step burst, the sort of like
Hmm.
lateral quickness, and just sort of like the confusion that those sort of like inverted actions can cause at the point of attack defensively help Cam, I think, get downhill or at least get like a slight edge. And if he can get just like his like shoulders or his like, his sort of like his knee past you, then he can use his combination of strength, footwork, balance, to kind of get to his spots in the middle of the floor and get into the paint and get downhill. He's drawing a lot of fouls this year. And in the Arkansas game, that's sort of how he was like Trevin Brazil kept him in front, but Cam was still sort of able to, again, kind of get to his spots off those looks. So that's been a very powerful play for them so far this season. He's been very good as a screener because the floor is sort of open for him. Like he can get downhill on the roll, but he's far more comfortable, I would say, popping for three. And then once he pops, he can look to get into second side action. He can shoot. He can attack a closeout. Or he's been used on the short roll a lot. And that's actually one of the ways he's used. His usage sort of does map similarly with Cooper's from a year ago, where Duke really tried to get Cooper in those pockets of space and to be the creator 4-on-3 on the backside. And Cam, I think, has been pretty good scoring or playmaking out of that. So I mean, the numbers, it's hard to argue with the numbers. By the stats, he's been the best player in the country so far this year. And I do think he has been obviously for Duke like the biggest driver of their wins and losses. By no means is he a perfect prospect. I mean, I think again we can sort of like get into some of the critiques with him about his the interior finishing, the lateral abilities defensively, the issues with the rim protection, all that sort of stuff. But his fundamentals, his skill level, his shooting, his footwork, his passing, his processing, and his like intangible leadership component is all quite good. So he's a big time prospect, and he's had obviously a pretty tremendous start, albeit an imperfect one for him this season.
Uh, couldn't have said it any better myself, nor would I dare try. Uh, I agree with the vast, vast majority of what you said, and I think it's important the way that you put it because what I'm going to say as we talk through Cam, probably just because this is where my head is at with him in comparison to what my idea of him was coming in. My framework might seem to be a bit nitpicky, but I want to make sure that anyone who's listening, understands that nitpicky means like, ooh, do I think he should be going in the top two or not? Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
all very relative.
Mhm.
Um, you mentioned that they are running a lot of similar actions as when they had Cooper Flag. Interestingly enough, about a year ago when we first spoke about Cooper Flag, that was right around the time that it was like right before Cooper's like shooting numbers took
Mhm.
off. Because it seems like ancient history now, especially with what Cooper's doing in the NBA as he like turns 19 this week or whenever that's going to happen. But his non-conference performance as a then 17-year-old for Duke was like good and encouraging. Undoubtedly, like lots of stuff popped off the tape, but there was also, lots of instances, particularly in late game situations, where he seemed kind of uncertain as to which part of his offensive game to trust. Duke lost a couple of those games. He didn't get the job done in isolation a couple of times, and his true shooting, I think, got as low as like 50 before he then exploded and left everyone in the dust. Uh, the the same thing is not happening with Cam because his true shooting is 65 right now. And in most of these clutch games, Duke has won. I mean, this Texas Tech game was the exception over the weekend, but I think for people who believed that Cam was every bit the prospect that Cooper Flagg was, or perhaps even a better prospect than Cooper Flagg was, they still have the statistical case to back that up. He is scoring efficiently. He's a double-double machine. He clearly is a valuable passer. And you mentioned defensive questions, which we will get into, but he still, gets those juicy deflections that people like to see.
Mhm.
Uh, there is an excellent, excellent NBA player in here. However, I just want to start by saying to me, and Cooper's set the bar very, very high, so it's difficult to grade anyone on this curve. But if we're talking about presumptive number one overall picks, I think that Cooper Flagg is like a tier above as a prospect
Yeah,
Cam Boozer.
agree.
And there's many reasons for that, but the easiest and simplest one is just like overall athletic talent
Mhm.
because Cooper is 6'9" and can move and elevate and glide like a guard can. And Cam just simply cannot do that despite being, roughly the same height.
Mhm.
So let's get that out of the way, number one. At least in my, like, that's my opinion. Do you agree with that? That
Totally
overall,
can
yeah.
totally agree. Great prospect. Not on the same level as Flag as a prospect though.
And like very few players are, no shame in that. We still
Yeah,
hold our head high.
yeah.
So now we keep going.
Cooper was special, like is
Yeah,
special and will continue to be special. He was a unique, number one prospect because he
right.
was super young and insanely good.
And with Cam, for example, like you mentioned defensively, he to me has been like outright targeted on
Mhm.
defense by a couple teams. It was pretty noticeable in this Texas Tech game, but like in the Michigan State game, for example, Michigan State started that game off very, very fast. They got out in transition a little bit in that first half. And there were, you know, two or three lobs in that first half where, Cam was not in an easy position because he was sort of backpedaling in transition. That's always a difficult spot to be in, but he got himself caught in no man's land frequently. He was a step late in contesting, a drives from Cohen Carr. It's very hard to be on time when Cohen Carr is coming to drive and finish. But like you could see that he just was not the best athlete on the floor. That has
Mhm.
been the case for him in, I think, maybe every single game that they have played against high major competition, that he is not outright
Mhm.
the best athlete on the floor. And if that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be the number one overall pick, it's notable. Now, to me, what it does mean is that if you're going to be the number one pick without, necessarily being a top tier NBA athlete, it means that you have to have a way to control a game and have an offense revolve around your talents.
Mhm.
That's, you look at anyone, Luka, Jokic, whoever is not the best athlete, Con Knipple perhaps, who might end up being a number one overall talent, just stuck behind another one in the draft that he went in. You got to be able to control a game, manipulate a game to your specifications. That is where I think the conversation gets very, very interesting on Cam. Uh, you mentioned his touch to every level of the court. This was the quality that I thought was going to stick out the most about his offensive game coming into the year. Uh, his true shooting is excellent. He's drawing heaps of fouls, which helps contribute to that.
Mhm.
Though he's only shooting whatever he's shooting, like 75% on free throws, with he's getting close to 100 attempts on the year. Uh 3-point percentage, a smaller sample. I think he's like 16 of 46, something like that. Around 33%, maybe a little bit more so far in the season. Both those numbers have room to improve. They improve for
Mhm.
Cooper Flag. They can improve for Cam Boozer. But I, what I notice about his shot form, especially when he pops out to three, is sort of chained to his only okay athleticism, which is
Mhm.
that it is not a very like it is not a shot form that lends itself to diverse looks, nor
Mhm.
is it a shot form that really lends itself to like a sudden release off the dribble. Kind of like his dad, when his dad played, it is sort of a like put the ball to the side of your head, like rear back and
Mhm.
really launch kind of shot form. And it results in this really high arcing shot that when it goes in looks great, looks automatic. You know, it you can definitely see how this guy could put up 5 or 6 threes a night, maybe even more in the NBA in the right offense and be very, very productive. But because it doesn't have that variability to it, it shrinks his margin of error just that much more.
Mhm.
Because if Cam is going to be a great player, he's not going to be like, or like, top number one overall pick, what have you. He's not going to get there without healthy 3-point volume because he's, he might be a center at the NBA a little bit. He wouldn't be the first undersized five with defensive questions to actually come in and succeed. But without the 3-point element, if he
Mhm.
is just sort of mid-range and in, posted in, it's as someone who is not going to athletically overwhelm people, it's going to be very difficult. So that 3-point touch, just to me, like I can't overstate how crucial it is to his evaluation. So the question I'm going to put back to you is, do you believe the numbers are one thing, the numbers can improve, but do you believe that his touch is like elite touch, or do you think it's in the realm of like very good? Is it also sort of sub where maybe some people might have thought it was?
I do think he has elite touch. I agree that there are some of the sort of like metrics indicators at the moment are sort of like yellow green as opposed to like bright green.
Right.
Um, and your points on his shot are absolutely well taken, like top to bottom. Like not only just like sort of like the challenges with getting it off in certain situations, but just like how important that's going to be to um sort of like his career on the next level, like really ascending to some of the um some of the ranges that are being projected for him at the moment. Cause like that's gonna set everything up, like how teams guard him, the playmaking opportunities that will be available. It's gonna be, how he can be used as a screener, like all of that's really gonna be his ability to stretch it is going to be like an important piece of the puzzle for him, obviously. Um, but I think his touch to me does show up like when he's involved in like a fair amount of like live ball, sort of like short mid range, sort of like runner floater zone,
Hmm.
whether
Hmm.
it's like an isolation, whether it is a pick and roll, and he's sort of gotten to like a Barkley style drive. He's much more comfortable, honestly, sort of the way Cooper was at this time last year, like picking on a small in a mismatch than he is like getting a switch with a five and kind of like trying to like,
Of
turn the
course,
corner
yeah,
on
because
those.
he doesn't have the burst,
Yeah,
right, to really
exactly.
punish him.
So
Yeah.
he wants to get to his power game and then try to get two on the ball and pass out of it, or whether it's just like a direct post up when he's able to like go left and spin back right, that's sort
Hmm.
of like his go-to play. I thought in the second half against Florida, Ruben Chinyello did a nice job like taking some of those plays away from him and trying to like make it tougher for him to get back to his right. But when he's able to spin on that left foot and get back to his right, his ability to use the glass to finish in traffic around length, size, all really, really good. And I do just think in general, his shooting numbers, along with probably like Isaiah Evans too, like I just think those numbers are going to pop a little bit more as the
Hmm.
season goes along. And I could see Cam getting in the high 30s from threes and, that 80%. He's not far away from 80% from the line too. Like I said, these aren't like concerning indicators, I don't think. So I would say elite touch, and that's like an important to me. His skill he has to be maxing out like in all of the sort of like not maybe not maxing out, but he has to be like rated highly in all of these skill components. It's why the footwork, the shooting touch, the floor, the vision, the court mapping, like all of that has to be very good to great, if not elite, for him to like really be the kind of like prospect that I think he has the chance of being. So so for the time being, I'll continue to ride with him from a touch component. And I think some of the numbers showcase that he's got decent touch, but I think on some of the shot difficulty and some of the shot making from him this season also speaks to the fact that he does have high end touch.
Yeah. Uh, I I think that it is more likely that you are right and that the numbers go in that direction than that they sort of stay where they are.
Hmm.
Because if his full season numbers are where they're at, where he's like 75% from the line and low to mid 30s from three, that would be concerning if that's a full
Yeah.
season sample, especially with how important his touch is going to be for him at the next level. I think it's more likely that they reflect what you're talking about. Uh, but you mentioned that his spin move that he uses going back to his right.
Hmm.
I, you know, Boozer's funny to me. I was talking with another buddy who does this, texting with him, and I was saying that like watching Boozer was making me like grumpy. I couldn't quite say frustrated because he's still doing so much that is good, and I want to make
Hmm.
sure I'm interspersing my thoughts with all that he's doing that is good. And you look up and you're like, man, was he really that good that game? And it's like, yeah, well, he was 23 and 12 with 5 assists and like, four
Hmm.
deflections and they won by 15. And you're like, I guess he was really good. But the for a player who has gotten his reputation as this top guy pre-college and someone who is this more traditional power, traditional in quotes, but like a more traditional power forward build.
Hmm.
Someone like you said values the glass, loves either block, working out of the post. What I was expecting to see out of him was more manipulative footwork. Really kind of it's not one to one between him and a guy like Derek Queen, because Derek really is his own
Hmm.
like little unicorn in what he can do. But Boozer gets a lot done through like very simple angles, very simple strength leverage, because
Yeah.
he's strong as a horse already at
He's
18
got some
years
like
old.
con to his game, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
there's some of that those like yeah, like you said, very simple usage of angles, strength, step throughs, like spins, like that kind of stuff is
right.
sort of like where how he's gonna like at least for the time being is existing in these
And
spaces.
and I loved that about Khan's game, and I really like it about Cam's game. And I'm trying to make sure I'm not like just knocking him for the aesthetics. But if he's going to control a game, like really control a game, that means that I think that he's got to be relatively matchup proof at what he does really, really well. And to me, the easiest way as a big man in the NBA now who plays out of the post or who loves that area of the floor, wants to set up there, the easiest way to dominate matchup to matchup is to have some sort of bag where you are messing with your defender's timing, where they
Hmm.
just don't know when to leave their feet or when to stay home. You are constantly wrong footing them and creating, the easiest path to an open layup as you possibly can. And Cam, I think he gets plenty of easy looks. So again, I don't want to sound like I'm knocking him, but there just was there is a lack of uh really like eye-popping creativity to his game.
Hmm.
There's and I don't want to because I think probably the way that he feels a defender on his back is pretty creative or artistic, whatever pretentious word that we want to use. I think there is some sort of like subtle elegance there, but it's not, whatever star you want to say. Jokic we can even put to the side, but like Şengün or what Queen is doing in New Orleans as a rookie. I mean, these are guys who like embarrass their opponent because they are a step ahead mentally with
Hmm.
how they are setting up their drives and their pivots. And I don't see that out of Boozer. What the opportunities that he's had in isolation that you mentioned have not gone as well, which is why they're using inverted pick and rolls or they're using
Hmm.
ghost screens or they're doing whatever to try to mitigate his lack of burst. Like there's very little manipulation. It's him kind of driving in a straight line, getting met by a body more often than not, and needing to reset. Now, if he gets an action that gets his shoulder by someone,
Hmm.
then yeah, it's game over. He's too strong, his touch is too good, he's going to score. But if you're wanting someone again to like control a game to where he can be a hub, and I want to use this to talk about his playmaking as well, uh, you want him to be able to get more done on his own, or I want him to be able to get
Hmm.
more done on his own. And what makes it so important is that he is, in my opinion, like an excellent passer. I think he is very, very good with his pass placement. Like when he wants to skip or he wants to do like a face up connecting pass from the perimeter, more often than not, it is like in the shooting pocket, right on the money,
Hmm.
and it keeps the defense in rotation and really is setting his teammates up for success. But the pace at which he plays to me is like he seems like he needs things sped up for him in order to like reach his best rhythm as a player where like the defense is already in rotation a little bit
Hmm.
and that allows that gives him that extra half step that maybe he doesn't already have so that every option is available to him. He can drive, the defense is going to freak out because he has that little extra bit of burst that's been created for him, or he could, make one of these like really quick good on the money reads, or he could
Hmm.
pop and shoot. Uh but the way that he likes to score is usually at a little bit of a slower pace. So even though like I think the ideal pace for Duke with his talents is maybe a little bit quicker, the fact that he likes to field defenders on his back and the fact that he likes to play a little bit slower is creates this weird little dichotomy to me watching him about what he's going to be at the next level. Because if he's going to control games as a top offensive pick, then the game is going to be played at his pace. At
Hmm.
sooner or later, like if you're the best offensive player on your team, that's what happens. The game gets played at your pace. And I see this tension between how he plays the game when he is in control and they are deferring to him versus the pace at which he is most effective when maybe a little less responsibility is given to him to create the advantage. Do
Hmm.
you see a similar tension? I mean, you mentioned how Duke is using him to spring him and make things easy on him.
Hmm.
But do you see a similar tension in how how he goes about scoring and the pace at which he does so?
Yeah, I do. In the half court at least, because I do think when he's just like playing, like when he's just able to hit ahead in transition, then he really is dictating. He's just literally throwing the ball ahead of the defense,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Duke is running into layups and dunks and threes on the other end. And so that to me does feel like a time where like his the game is sort of like in his pocket in those sorts of instances. Um, when it slows down in the half court, he just becomes he's incredibly like methodical. And I think that helps him from like inefficiency, turnover, mistake avoidance, get the ball up on the glass aspect. But it does also, make the offense at times feel, it can make it feel sticky, even for a guy who's an amazing passer. It's just like his best methods for getting two on the ball are coming with his back to the basket, right?
Hmm.
And to whether it's like it's direct, it's a design post up, or it's an isolation pick and roll that has turned into um like a Barkley style back down drive, like that's just when that's in that inherently is going to be slower, right? Than just from a physics standpoint than someone who can beat you or at least force double teams or the defense to put two on the ball, um, slashing, and sort
Right.
of like going full tilt towards the rim with a live dribble. So it's not like he can't do that. But those sorts of like quick drives, again, sort of maybe to your initial point, are a little bit better when he can like play off the catch and pop into space or short roll into space and then get into the space. But even on some of those short roll plays, like he likes to catch it at the nail or catch it sort of like foul line extended, and then he wants to like face up and jab and play make off of that. Um, his passing is the best part of his game, I think, right now, just like from a
I
court
agree.
court mapping processing standpoint. So yeah, it's like there's a to me there feels like a broad, spectrum of player types he could end up as, because in part two, because I feel great about the rebounding and shooting, and the playmaking component. It's like basically like could he potentially be like a like substar player at the next level who like also has all the offense run through him. There's like a Boris Diaw style like scenario. Like I think that's like a possibility. um but yes, right now I do think there is this sort of like tension in general. I think it is actually like coursing through Duke's offense. um and that really, I mean, Boozer is the guy that touches it on every possession. He's the guy that like starts everything for them. That like they're looking for ways to like get even faster in the half court
Hmm.
and in their
Hmm.
secondary offense. And John Shire has talked about it after multiple games that I've covered this season. And I think a lot of that sort of like, again, it's not all on Cam, obviously, but as like the capital T, capital G, the guy for Duke, he is like a big piece of probably needing a big piece for them to try to find ways to play faster in the half court. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with sort of like where he is development wise. It is worth, I mean, you touched on this too. Like he's 18 years old right now too. So
Right.
like I think some of these like skill component things, the footwork, the counters, the ways towards getting easier baskets are things that he can work on to improve, to add pieces to his game that again are going to be necessary to sort of like offset some of the like speed quickness limitations.
I agree. And I want to keep reemphasizing that, like, there are, when we talk about the difference between Duke needing to create a half step for him versus what he does in ISO, if you are good enough to where that little extra half step that coaches gin up for you means that you're like this unstoppable double double machine that everybody fouls, that
Yeah.
makes you a really, really good player. And he is a really, really good player. However, and I want to also make sure that I'm emphasizing that there's nothing wrong with playing slowly and methodically. It is not, even if Duke wants to play as fast as possible, it is not that faster is always better.
Hmm.
Like, again, you look at Nikola Jokic, he plays plenty methodically. Luka Doncic plays very methodically. It's the difference is that as opposed to being excellent passers, those are like GOAT passers,
Yeah.
and they can manipulate their defenders, Luka with his handle, Jokic with his brain, to be very simple about it. But they can manipulate their defenders and get to wherever they want to on the floor off the dribble because of it's
Hmm.
chained to all their other talents. Boozer has already shown some difficulty in getting to where he wants to go off the dribble in these ISO possessions. And though there is time to improve that kind of stuff, like, if we're talking about age, Şengün was MVP of his Turkish league at 18 years old. Like, I just kind of believe that when it comes to creativity and it comes to manipulation, like you either have that or you don't. You can maybe get better at it marginally, but how you get your buckets, I think, is usually pretty evident pretty quickly in high major college basketball. If
Hmm.
you are a really, really good athlete, you might have more of a like room to improve. You might have like more pathways to improvement, which was the case with Cooper. And since Boozer does not strike me as that, I think the way he scores around the hoop is just kind of the way he scores around the hoop. Maybe 5 years into his NBA career, he adds a move here or there. He adds like a Dirk fade or whatever that looks really,
Hmm.
really good. And now that's this other dimension. But between now and then, like I said before, the best thing he can do is make sure those 3-point attempts are nice and healthy. That is sort of the easiest band-aid to what I'm talking about here. And what you're referring to is like a little bit of stickiness or clunkiness occasionally in the way that Duke wants to play. Best way to bridge that gap, especially if you have elite touch, is to make sure you're shooting enough threes to keep a defense scrambling.
Hmm.
So that's sort of where I'm at with Cam now. Not a finished product, obviously, not a finished scouting report on my part, but someone who is not the clear number one who I thought he was coming into the year. Not going to talk about Peterson or Dibanza because they're not in the ACC in this episode, but like certainly not the clear number one, but a really, really good player who I think needs to, like you mentioned, like he's got to start maximizing the stuff that he's really good at to make sure he maintains as wide a margin of error as possible. Because
Hmm.
sub elite athlete, to put it kindly, coupled with someone who's not that manipulative, to me, it is hard to imagine like a modern NBA offense like really, really running through him. He could still
Hmm.
be a valuable part of one, but it's hard to imagine him being capital T, capital G to use your parlance in the NBA.
Hmm.
But we'll see what the rest of the season holds. But any other thoughts on him?
No, he's a fascinating guy to consider because of this, because I feel very confident in him being, I mean, obviously he's a phenomenal player now. And I feel very good about him being like a guy that really contributes to winning and is like a good NBA player. Um, but some of these sticking points are a little concerning if you're sort of considering what this guy's ultimate ceiling sort of looks like. So, um, fascinating next 3 months for him from an evaluation standpoint. And yeah, looking forward to seeing more Cam the back half of the season. But there's some work to be done on his end, that's for sure.
Okay, so we could stay on Duke because there's other guys to talk about, but given how mock drafts are and everything, I want to go to Caleb Wilson on
Yeah.
UNC, especially because he provides a great contrast with Boozer. Uh, Caleb is, what is he listed at? 6'10", probably that
Yeah.
neighborhood.
6'10", 215.
And whatever athletic limitations we might see in Cam do not really exist for Caleb. He
Mhm.
is averaging, I believe, 19, 10, and 4. So in Cam's neighborhood, but lacks a lot of Cam's craft as a scorer and just
Mhm.
sort of reliability as a scorer. He is probably, step for step, the best athlete in the draft, I would think, especially when
Mhm.
you couple his size. His athleticism constantly, constantly, constantly jumps off the tape. And he's only made like 4 threes all year. He likes to attack despite no matter what the defense is doing. He likes to just sort of dribble really hard and fast towards the rim and see what happens and solve it from there. Also like a decent passer in his own right, does not
Mhm.
have tunnel vision, which I think is very impressive given how he could play if he wanted to. But a fascinating athlete and player. What do you see when you've watched Caleb so far at UNC?
Well, for starters, the defense is ridiculous. Like he to me, in part because of the athleticism and the compete level, and obviously the tools are all very good. But when you package it together, he screams like potential star defender.
Hmm.
And like to maybe sort of like cheaply or poorly borrow like an offensive term, like he is like a like 3 or 4 level defender. It's like guard the ball, guard the point of attack. Sure. Be in the gaps in the middle of the floor. Check. Can he also like you know, destroy things and be disruptive as like a weak side rim protector? Check. Can he switch around and guard different positions? He can guard five in college, pretty credibly. So he just kind of can do so many different things on that side of the floor. There's like a like McDaniels style
Hmm.
defender here. You know what I mean? In terms of like the rare athleticism, the length, the competitiveness, and his ability to sort of like already at a young age just like package it all together. Um Offensively, it's a little bit more of a mystery box because again, he does not shoot threes right now. Um he is very much fond when he's sort of like handling the ball if he's not like passing, setting someone up. He takes a lot of these like tough mid-range shots, spinning fadeaways, um, difficult looks, and he makes some of them, but those are very difficult shots. They're not particularly efficient. And at times, it feels like he's kind of letting a defender off the hook, just given how athletic and how that's usually superior to the guys he's being faced, whether it's a smaller defender or a larger defender, but doesn't have the speed to sort of check him, but loves those sort of like turnaround mid range shots. Has gotten to the line at an insane rate this season, leads the country in dunks. Um,
Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
yeah, leads the
Yeah.
country in dunks and is on pace to break several like high major D1 records for dunks in a season, provided he stays healthy and UNC keeps playing basketball deeper into the season. So,
Yeah, dunk
uh,
record for a freshman that's been charted is Bam
bam,
Adebayo, who had 99
yeah,
and only played like 20 minutes a game. Shout
yeah,
out to uh, Coach
Cal,
Calipari.
Coach
But yeah,
Cal, um, man, Coach Cal. Well, I've watched a lot of Arkansas, so I just have some like thoughts on him, but we'll
yeah.
table those for another time. But like the I think back Marvin Bagley at Duke is probably up there too, from just like a freshman dunks perspective. But regardless, Wilson, his ability to slash is intriguing. His ability to play off the catch, and it just sort of feels like if he catches it with a head of steam and he's inside of 14 feet or whatever, like it just a dunk is coming. It feels sort of like inevitable. Has a nose for the ball, can really offensive rebound. And it's not just all pure like above the rim stylings. Like he's got the ability to cover a lot of ground, obviously, and get to certain spots because of his tools. But I think again, there's just like a feel and a want to like a to get the ball. So I really like him. I was on him coming into was pretty high on him coming into the season, but he already has like exceeded my expectations for him. And the defense is it's just hard to watch him play and not like think about just what he could be on that side of the court. So phenomenal prospect. Certainly has some like similar to Boozer. By no means perfect. Has some holes. Has some like really like potentially existentially concerning things that he needs to like work on as far as like his prospect status goes. But he's terrific, and he right now he is like solidly. I mean, it's probably the case for most people. Like, I don't have a full board, but like he's in the top 3 or 4 for me. Like, he's been phenomenal.
He, you know, haven't watched enough of everybody, but I imagine that is where he would be for me too.
Yeah.
McDaniels is a name that I thought of a lot in watching him, though I think at the same age, like I think that Caleb's probably a little bit bigger than McDaniels, a bit more strongly built. I mean, McDaniels was
Hmm.
a pretty skinny kid at Washington when he was there as a freshman. So you could, there's a train of thought that you could say that he's a better defensive prospect than McDaniels was. McDaniels has grown into becoming this incredible defender. Uh, yeah, it's nice to just sort of be reminded what an elite like defensive athlete really looks like. Because you
Hmm.
hear, I mean, that you mentioned three-level defender, but the phrase like guard 1 through 4, guard 1 through 5 is almost like, I mean, I think it is a cliche in the draft. Like anytime
For
there's any
sure.
wing with any versatility, that's what they say. And the NBA tends to embarrass 99% of those evaluations because of the nature of how
Yeah.
elegant all the offenses are and how punishing they are, how ruthless. Uh,
Hmm.
Caleb is not going to solve all the world's problems defensively. The only player who can really do that is Victor Wembanyama, and
Yeah.
there's only one of him.
Yeah.
But I think that he, well, I'll put it this way. I want to contrast him with Colin Murray Boyles, who was drafted last year. Another incredible defender. Murray Boyles is smaller, more around like 6'6" in socks. I'm sure
Hmm.
Caleb is like 6'9" in socks. And but both very, very talented, both really good rebounders. What I loved about Murray Boyles as a defender was, had extremely strong hands, but also
Hmm.
his positioning was like always perfect on defense. Constantly anticipated what the action was if he didn't already recognize it like as it was happening and could put himself in the best position to make plays. And that was when he was probably, carrying a little bit extra weight that he has since shed since,
Hmm.
becoming a rookie in the NBA because he was a post player in college. But you could just see how quickly his mind was moving. Caleb, I don't think has the same sort of savant quality as Murray Boyles. But he has so much athletic twitch and so
Hmm.
much desire that it still can be overwhelming for the other team. Now, projecting what that's going to mean in the NBA is twofold. On the one hand, you could say that, well, in the NBA, he's going to be around NBA talent. So all of this athleticism is going to be magnified by his teammates. Like, for example, his tendency to just sort of like dribble into people and do like really crazy athletic stuff without any seeming plan. Like, that's going to become a lot easier because his NBA team is going to like run in transition a lot and hit him ahead. And
Hmm.
he'll get the ball and be able to blow past whatever defender's coming at him. And all of a sudden he's at the rim and
Yeah.
it's over.
Play out of flow and just let him attack. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
As
like
opposed to trying to do it out of a set, 3/4 of the time or
right.
whatever.
So you could say, well, that's going to be great for him then. Like it's Jover, as the kids would say. The other train of thought on it is that guys who rely on the sort of athletic twitch and like the just sort of high motor but just overwhelming athleticism, they tend to have very productive careers. I mean, there's no replicating basketball athleticism if you're in the top 1 or 2%, but it is hard to, in my opinion, hard to be sort of first team all defense without having sort of exceptional anticipation.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that Caleb doesn't have like very, very good anticipation, but I would say, again, you're comparing him to sort of the greats. Like Amen Thompson has higher overall feel for the game on both sides of the ball.
Hmm.
And Amen's amazing, but this is sort of the point that I'm making. Uh, I think if you wanted to maybe look at Anunoby, who is was
Mhm.
also built really, really strongly in a similar way to how Caleb's built strongly, but even OG probably as a he was probably listed like 6'8", 225, like a bit thicker as a prospect than Caleb is. Uh you could maybe find some similarities there, although Caleb is probably even bouncier than OG was. But there's just a certain amount of uh reactivity as opposed to the sort of proactivity that I saw in Murray Boyles that makes me think that while I think Caleb can be an all defense player and in like an excellent defender, that I would stop short of being like this guy is just going to like take over the league with his athleticism. I think it still sort of trends him towards being a very, very valuable role player as opposed
Mhm.
to a star around which you could construct an entire defense. Maybe that's like me being a little too muted, but that's sort of how I feel. What do you think about his anticipation and how he reads the game defensively?
Yeah, no, those are great points. I don't think he is the sort of like defensive processor that, CMB was in college. That's not how he's really, to me, when he's like taking over a game defensively in college. It's again, it's him really like tapping into his wingspan, his
Hmm.
athleticism, the twitch, his speed in the ground coverage that really gets to it, as opposed to just like him being a half step ahead of everybody on that side of the court. Like he just has the tools and the gifts physically to in the and like the compete. I mean, he's a really super competitive player that plays really hard too, right? So it's like he's applying these tools at a very high, like a very industrious sort of like work rate. And I think that allows them to like really sing. But I agree that like if he's going to become one of these sorts of, a guy that's just like routinely making all NBA defensive teams as a wing defender in the NBA or whatever, yeah, of course. He's going to have to get better from the processing decision making uh quotient on that side of the court. So um and in general, I mean, I don't know, maybe there's even just sort of like a more broad conversation about like I guess New York is that like right now is sort of going with this approach of like really building its defense out from the wing as opposed to
Hmm.
like anchoring it with like like a rim deterrent five, and then sort of like going from there. Anunoby is an interesting comp too. He's of course just built like a Mack truck. You sort of talked about his frame being so solid. So Wilson has the frame where he should be able to get stronger. He's going to have to get stronger. Um, I'm going to be curious to see, especially in the ACC play, just sort of like how some of the fours in the league that maybe have a little bit more weight are sort of able to like get into him. But I'm really the thing that I will be keeping an eye on more than anything else is like where he is in the gap and where he is when he is tasked with being sort of like a backline rim protector. UNC's defense is a little interesting. Like they primarily are like a drop coverage. Um, like no middle team as they have been under Hubert Davis. And so maybe that gives per game there's like a few fewer chances for the defense to be in rotation. Like that type of coverage is really predicated on like trying to keep the ball in front, keeping a guy in
Hmm.
front of the big in front of the rim. Or as opposed to if they were blitz and ball screens with Henri Veesaar, up at the point of attack, and all of a sudden it was Wilson was being asked to put out, 20 fires per game on the back end as the sort of like the guy to close things down and that type of coverage. It would be really fun to see what that would look like. Like it would be kind of a cool like test case for him. Um, but yes, I agree. Like it's maybe not quite exactly where you want it to be, but the tools at times are just so overwhelming that I'm still incredibly high with him as like a defensive wing prospect.
Yeah, I agree. And I think he can, like I said, I think he can make all defense teams. And your comparison to how New York has, I believe, a top 10 defense
Hmm.
on a per possession basis right now.
Yeah.
And you know, don't want to get into too much of a tangent, but just like intuitively, if you have relative deficiencies at guard and at big, the way they might with Brunson and with Towns, then the value of the wings is not only to lock up their matchups or make it very hard to run whatever guard pick and rolls or whatever the case may be, but it's that if you play a conservative enough scheme, like you're talking about, where the big is closer to the rim, then any fire that you do have to pull it out is like a local fire that sort of just length and recovery and explosion can usually take care of. It's when you're putting that player in position where they have to constantly like make decisions and recover as opposed to just recovering intuitively because they're sort of close to shooting the gap or to digging at the nail or whatever it is they need to do. Like you want to make sure that the recovery is as easy as possible. You don't want to use the temptation of this guy's athleticism and just say, we're going to play hyper aggressive and you will solve every one of our problems. You want to make
Mhm.
sure that the problems that he solves are problems that are just sort of in his locality, so to speak, so that even if he is a beat late, his athletic talents cover for him being a beat late. And I think that it's important to emphasize that as we talk about sort of the difference, like where he is lacking a little bit, again, whatever he had like 20 and 15 and 5 against Ohio State yesterday. Like he is, let's just say as a rebounder, because we talked about Boozer's talent as a rebounder. And Boozer has like great hands, is very strong,
Mhm.
but Boozer positions himself to rebound. He sort of spams rebounding positioning to the point where he will like not challenge shots, which again like Derek Queen does it, Jokic does it, Şengün does it to an extent. It can be a valid strategy in the NBA to make sure that you are positioning yourself for a defensive rebound. But Caleb Wilson as like an out of area rebounder,
Mhm.
as a sort of contested ball winner, like he is borderline breathtaking at
Mhm.
that skill. Because like you said, he's used at every level of the defense. He can be used to just guard the best guard on the other team in a given possession, and UNC uses him that way a good amount. And to still routinely get 11, 12, 15
Mhm.
rebounds in a game when you're that out of rebounding position is incredible. And to your point about McDaniels before, talking about the body types of these wings, like Jaden McDaniels was not pulling down 10 rebounds a game as a freshman
Mhm.
at Washington. So, like, the rebounding talent, this kid's talent as a finisher, the ability to get to some of these dunks off the dribble when he's not taking the most like rehearsed or practiced or polished footwork on his drives to the rim. Like there's a ton here. And I
Mhm.
really haven't seen anyone rank him above Boozer yet. I'm not saying I am there now
You
because
haven't talked to many UNC fans. That's the they'll yell at you online if you haven't already if on like November 8th you didn't make that decree that Wilson is currently superior and will always be superior than Cam Boozer.
well, that sounds like a lovely use of their time and good for them.
Yeah,
Bless them.
fair enough.
That's what
Yeah.
the internet's there for, is to yell and be angry about hopefully trivial things. But I I just want to say that the productivity that Boozer has is like very impressive, and Duke is doing everything in its power to set him up to have that productivity.
Mhm.
Wilson's productivity is incredibly impressive, and he is almost getting there in spite of himself. And that is what is so notable to me when I compare the two as prospects. That's why I think there
Mhm.
is a possibility, maybe not a likelihood, because I think the 3 point issue and his
Yeah.
lack of willingness to take them the lack of willingness to really even look at the hoop from behind three, the fact that he likes to set up at the elbow, like all that stuff will probably keep Boozer ahead of him when
Mhm.
finally make up my mind. But my mind is at least more open to this comparison than it was at the beginning of the year. So kudos to Caleb for closing the gap the way that he has.
Yep, fair. It's again, it's gonna be. I mean, those guys are gonna match up against one another, which will be really fun when Duke and UNC play. And for both guys, because I think I touched on this with more with Caleb, maybe a little bit with Cam. Both are super duper competitive, like
Hmm.
incredible. Like so, it's gonna make for perhaps a compelling finish to the season for both guys heading into the draft too. But um, I think that gives them both each like a little bit of an edge as a prospect because like they're really invested in it. Um, and again, there's no guarantees, but that gives them uh, a little bit, maybe a little more likelihood that they really do turn into sort of like the players that we hopefully project them out to be.
Yeah. If Cam is more reminiscent in play style of his father, Carlos Boozer, with extra, passing
Hmm.
feel and overall processing, then Caleb is more reminiscent from the same era of like Amari Stoudemire. And he
Hmm.
Amari never went to college. He was one of the last like straight to NBA out of high school guys. But he had the athleticism to boot. And when I'm trying to think of, as we've mentioned, Anunoby and McDaniels, like athletic comps for Caleb where they have that size and the frame with the bounce
Hmm.
and the non-stop rim hunting. Stoudemire is the guy that came to mind for me, which is
Hmm.
very exciting because that's he's an insane athlete. So
Yep. Both members of the 2004 US Olympic team. I believe they were teammates on that. And I can honestly say I can tell you the last high school Amari Stoudemire played at was Cypress Creek High School because I played an AAU nationals game down there when I was a kid. And walking into the high school gym and seeing Stoudemire's jersey retired was like, as a basketball nerd, I was like beside myself with glee to like see that in the gym. So shout out to both Amari Stoudemire and Carlos Boozer, I mean, I assume that will continue. He's been at every Duke game so far this
yeah.
season to see his kids play.
Yeah, it's absolutely, if I were in his position and had his means, of course, what else would
Same,
you be doing?
same
Yeah.
deal. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Um, okay, so there's another kid from the ACC who I think is, routinely mocked in the top 10, if not, certainly the lotto, but is probably top 10 in a lot of places, which is Mikel Brown Jr., guard out of Louisville. Michael is injured right now, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. Do you know how long he's supposed to remain out?
I believe it's a lower back injury, which is like a little
Uh,
scary. Yeah, it's not great. And he has missed the last two games. He did not play in the loss at Tennessee, and he
right.
did not play in the win against my Montana. My hope would be that he's ready to go come ACC play, and I think it was sort of easy to say to take him off the map, so to speak, uh,
Hmm.
this close to like a break coming up in this season
Hmm.
before you really sort of like things really start to churn. So I thought they were listing him day to day, but again, it is lower back, and he's missed each of the last two games, including the loss at Tennessee, which was sort of like an embarrassing result for Louisville. They got smoked on the road.
Yeah, I was dismayed that he was not able to play in that game for like a bunch of different reasons, but
Yeah.
that was especially seeing how well he played when they played Kentucky like early season as sort of a showcase, and
Yeah.
he had
Yeah.
20 points in that first half and was like
Touched the paint a million times, just
he
whenever
was
he
just
wanted
playing
to.
out of his mind.
Yeah.
That I wanted to see how he would. That game was played at home. You wanted
Hmm.
to see how he was going to do in a road environment. The caliber of Tennessee. But my very quick impression of Mikel is that it's interesting when you always hear these comps where it's like this. What would it be like if, you know, I don't know, the Kings got 95% LeBron James, and they're talking about like Jonathan Kuminga or whatever, like whatever, like this
Yeah.
percentage of X, percentage of Y, which I almost always stay away from. But I must confess, in watching Mikel, where I'm like, this seems to me to be some percentage of Dylan Harper last year.
Hmm.
Similar size, similar preference for driving, really good handle, very good playmaker, creative finishing package, kind of built in a similar way. Uh, and I want to emphasize, though, that he is not Dylan Harper for like
Hmm.
very, very particular reasons. But that was in just sort of the play style and what is attractive about him. I think there's like a certain resemblance. But what do you see when you watch him? And assuming that the injury gets taken care of, hopefully,
Hmm.
uh, how good do you think he can be with Louisville this year? Because that's another team that, fully healthy, you'd have people saying that they'll go to the Final Four.
I mean, just for starters, to piggyback off that last thing, like they're really set up to be good this season and to be like to like maximize Brown. Like he went to a great they made a good call with him going to Louisville. This is one of the fastest teams in the country. They lead the nation in assist rate, or pardon me, in 3-point attempt rate. There are secondary creators like an Adrian Woolley, who's really good
Hmm.
for him to sort of like vibe with and play off of. There are excellent movement shooters like Isaac McNeely
Hmm.
and Ryan Conwell. He's got a good like sort of like not just like playmaking five, but a guy
Oh, Frew,
in Frew
my
who
guy
can like
Frew. Yeah, he's
he's
good, man.
awesome, really good
Yeah.
player, came in from Germany and like is enough of like a bouncy athlete at the five spot. Like those two guys are like a pretty devastating like 1-5 pick and roll combo. And those they've been excellent together when healthy and on the floor. So they just got he's got and then with Ali Khalifa, they've got like a five that's sort of like like elbow handoff hub type guy. So just like there's different guys that he can sort of like bounce off of and interact with. So they really have it set up nicely. This is not the kind of team where like the way teams could like load up on Dylan Harper last season in the Big Ten. Like you cannot do that against Louisville. This team is too
Hmm.
fast. There's way too much shooting on the court. There's too many targets for him to throw the ball to, and they play incredibly, incredibly up tempo and fast. Pat Kelsey's a very friendly with analytics coach and a guy that has a very creative playbook too. So it's a great spot for Brown to be in. He's just got to get healthy, obviously. And so, but things are set up for him to have a big year if that can come to fruition. For me, like the comp with Harper is sort of like an interesting one as sort of like Harper certainly to a different caliber. Harper's the guy that absolutely deserve to be like a number one pick in a draft, and like would have been if Cooper does not reclassify, to last year's draft class. Brown, not quite on that level. Brown to me feels like a guy who really does set up a lot of his stuff with um like his like he does sort of like lean on this like step back, deep 3-point shooting. He's not shooting a good number from deep, but I watched him play with Team USA this past summer in FIBA play, watched every second of him there, along with every second he's played at Louisville so far this season. And it does feel like there's sort of like a step back gravity, sort of like pulling away. He uses his ability to like pull away from the basket as a means to sort of like getting him downhill. Whereas Harper, it just felt like a freight train going downhill. Obviously,
Hmm.
he's got skill and craft, and that's why Harper is an insane player and going to be. It's ridiculous. The Spurs got this guy, but like, um, to me, it just felt like he was a bowling ball going downhill. Whereas Brown, again, the setup is just like it's more of like a slingshot to get downhill. He's pulling back to then go towards the rim. But he's older for a freshman. I believe he's already 20, but incredibly crafty handle, has his first step with or without the ball, like with the ball already on a live dribble or off the catch, incredibly fast. He can turn the corner. He's again with this, he's got almost like more size and explosive, like burst and like vertical pop than you might expect him to be. I mean, some of the dunks he's had this season where he just kind of like gets on the edge, turns the
Hmm.
corner.
Hmm.
He had one the last game. He not maybe not. It was the Indiana game where he
Indiana, it was
turned the
towards the
corner.
end because he hadn't
Whew.
made anything from the field.
I think he was
And
like pissed, and he just decided
yeah.
to just say screw it and got downhill and got into the paint. Um, Again, hasn't shot a good number this season, but like I do think he's like a pretty like I believe in I buy his 3 point shot.
I think he made three in that game against Kentucky, like
Yeah,
three or four. So yeah,
and the
yeah.
degree of difficulty that he takes, he like that. I mean, this sort of gets to like one of my larger gripes with him is just sort of like the decision making is and shot selection is not always exactly where you want it to be. He sort of like to me he makes it more difficult on himself at times, especially with just like all these other tools that Louisville has. Um, but he's not like afraid to get off the ball. Like he'll get off the ball and run off down screens and play without it. It's not like there's this like apprehension like he's got to make every shot. It's just sometimes I think he uh calls his own number a few too many times. But maps the floor well, can make cross court skips, good hit ahead passer in the open floor. Incredibly skilled guy. Again, that on most nights when you're watching him in college is touching the paint, pretty much at will. Um, and can really make plays off of that too. So phenomenal guard prospect. I don't know if he's going to be point guard one for me in this draft. There's some other good competition for that, but
Mm.
he's going to be in. He's certainly going to be in the mix for it. And yeah, so I'd be kind of curious to hear your thoughts on Brown and kind of where you're at and what you've seen from him so far this season too.
Yeah, point guard one, I don't know. I've got a lot of
Fleming's.
Houston and
Yeah,
Alabama viewing in my future.
yeah.
But I
Uh,
will say that what he has that Phylon or Flemings or A Cuff or whoever you
yeah.
want to talk about,
These are the names for sure.
like
Yeah.
there's just a little extra, in my opinion, just like length and size to him. I've never seen like measurements, or I don't know if they did some sort of combine for some tournament or whatever. I don't know. Like he just looks bigger than those other guys and like more physically imposing. I think it's reflected in his his free throw rate. Like, and when you watch him drive and extend and finish, there are there are finishes that he can make. I think Jonathan Wasserman, Bleacher Report, did a video about how he finishes off like the nominal wrong foot frequently, but he's made it like a part of his game to give himself a little extra angle or little extra length to finish with. But he's just really, really good at it. And he does it physically, does not shy away from contact. And if you are, if you're some team high in the lotto when you're looking for a point guard and you're having trouble distinguishing between all these guys, I think you can be forgiven for just wanting to go with the one who is like the biggest. The irony in that, in Mikel's case, and I think a huge reason why he is not the same level of prospect that Dylan Harper was, you mentioned the burst, which I think is true, and you putting it's more like a slingshot. You know, he has to try to bait a defender into showing him a top foot to sort of attack before he can get all the way down there in ISO, as opposed to Harper, who could just sort of get there whenever he wanted. Like defensively, I have not been very impressed with Mikel. And you would
Yeah.
think that someone with his size would be able to be a neutral defender just through like paying attention. And when I've watched him, I haven't like I've seen him like get lost off the ball. I've seen him sort of give up on plays. I've seen him provide like maybe one effort, but not multiple efforts when he's defending on the ball in ISO. Like, it's not that I think that he gives no effort on that side, but like you mentioned, Louisville, pardon me. Louisville is built to succeed. They are not putting so much on his plate the way that Rutgers did with Harper last year. Harper was not always the most engaged defender, but he had his moments where he was, and you knew with his frame that he had some projectable traits. With Mikel, I I do not see him taking advantage of the accommodations that Louisville's roster provides because I would want to see more of a motor on defense. If the offense does not need to run through him because they're so deep, then I'd like to see him doing more to communicate on defense, execute his responsibilities, and just sort of be on his P's and Q's. Because as long as he's not out of position, like the defensive numbers, the metrics will come, but so far they haven't. And if he is managing or nursing any sort of an injury when he comes back, then I imagine it's still going to be like a pretty clear negative on that side of the ball. So, like,
Mhm.
what do you see? What have you seen out of him defensively? Am I being a little too harsh?
No, I think it's fair. I mean, I think the off-ball stuff is concerning. Ball watch, back cut, the sort of like right side of the box score style stats, steals, blocks aren't really showing up. This is not like a conservative defense by any means, as they primarily are going to hard hedge with Frew and put two on the ball, um, which isn't necessarily a guaranteed recipe for everyone on the throughout the roster to get blocks and steals, but it should at least inform that there are like these sort of like opportunities for havoc plays are going to maybe be like a little bit more prevalent, at least when it comes to steals and stuff like that. It also means it's a little less intensive, like from a screen navigation standpoint, which is something I want to see improvement from with Mikel too. Like when he gets to the NBA, he's going to be playing point guard on teams that are playing drop coverage, and he's going to have to do a better job getting over the top of these screens in rear view pursuit, using his length, using his size, his physicality in those cases. Because right now, like the guy in the action who's really like providing the punch and pressure on the ball is the five that's coming up and blitzing the screen. So I think there's a ways to go for him on that end. Um, and it just, I do sort of worry for a guy who really does play like a fair amount of like helio ball on offense, even though he really doesn't have to in Louisville's system, that just like he's going to be the kind of guy that if he's hitting his sort of like offensive ceiling or is in that sort of like area, he's going to be expending a tremendous amount of energy on that
Right.
side of the court, and therefore like the defense is going to become like optional. And so I just don't. I hope that's not the case. But right now, it's that to me doesn't feel like it's in a particularly good spot, even though the offense is, I think, in a pretty good place at the moment.
Yeah. That's you said it, and especially from modern NBA roster builds, if he's going to be the starting point guard, so I mean, you wouldn't be drafting him high to not be your starting point
Yeah.
guard. So if that's what you're going to use him as, then that's good. But you can't, roster building with top 10 point guards who are defensive liabilities. You can go back and look at whomever, look at Ja Morant, look at like guys who are good, who've had really nice moments and maybe won a playoff series or something. Like, I'm not saying that Mikel cannot be really good necessarily or become an all-star one day or whatever, but there is sort of a shelf life on some of that. I mean, there really is. You have to maintain such a ridiculously high level of offensive talent. And like you said, I agree. I think his shooting is better than the numbers have been. But if someone wants to take him in the top seven and entrust him with something, then you better be sure that he's like one of the three best offensive players in the draft, like
Hmm.
right now, in terms of just current skill level and ability to run an offense.
Hmm.
And, you know, since we both have doubts about him being point guard one, that starts to then have a trickle effect. Well, if you're, you know, the third most talented point guard on offense, but you have these defensive issues that keep cropping up, does that really make you a top 10 pick? Does that make you sort of a back end of lotto pick? Are
Hmm.
you more developmental then, where a team is not really handing you the keys? they're maybe just bringing you off the bench. Are you in sort of like a Yakashonis in Miami role again to
Mhm.
just compare him to somebody else? But like, I think he can slide into that sort of conversation if some of this stuff does not get better. But
Yeah.
a very impressive player nonetheless.
Yep. Again, a bet on like a pick of Brown is a bet on his creation upside, and there are reasons to be optimistic of that. Like he looks like a guy that could potentially be the kind of guy that like, yeah, you could run a Helio style offense through. Um, he has the ability to create space, right? Like he can create easy space on the step back. He's got that kind of handle and juice with the ball. Um, and guys like that are incredibly valuable. Even in a league where there's a lot of like ball handling talent, um, guys like that get paid a lot of money, get offenses built around them, et cetera, et cetera. Get teams to try hard to routinely build stuff around them. Just look at you mentioned Morant, but like I mean, at this point, Morant, Trey Young, LaMelo, like these teams that drafted these guys are still like years later, like hoping to like piece it back together. So, and betting on their spark with the ball and running pick and roll. So, again, I feel with those types of guys, like a prospect like Brown, there's a very real chance that someone like that could just like bust out because so much hinges on them being like super duper good at these things that for the vast majority of NBA players are inefficient. You know what I mean? Just like
Mhm.
running a ton of pick and roll and taking incredibly difficult off dribble threes is it's either like the pathway to superstardom or like a quick exit, like off ramp out of the league, you know? So,
Or
um,
like a middle way would be like, I don't know, Keontae George is having a
yeah,
great season in Utah,
yep.
and he was sort of like a late bloomer, relatively speaking. Great shot maker, has amazing coach for his
Yes,
talents and Will
that
Hardy. But like they also, with all of this amazing development from him, are like 13th in the West or whatever they are,
yeah,
11th in the
yeah,
West. Like it's
yeah,
just it's hard. It's a
yeah.
hard way to really turn your franchise around if you're not getting substantial two-way value out of that spot, you
Hmm.
know?
Yep, fair. And yeah, George, the a great spot. Like some of this with Brown may end up with like situation fit, coaching, that kind of stuff. You hand that guy the keys to the car at a rudderless franchise, and I would really worry about it. You put him in a spot where there's, the expectations are development, patience, and you've got a guy like Will Hardy, you can scheme it up. I mean, Keontae George, that was a good place for him to land. Was Utah, and he's certainly like making the most of it now. But for a guy like Brown, he doesn't have a whole lot of say, in where he's going to land. So, yeah, there's some like downside risk there too.
Yeah, so okay. Those are the three like super high profile guys. However, the depth in the ACC, I think, is notable this year. So there's a couple different directions we could go in. We can talk about another on-ball guy, which is Neoklis Avdalas, is the one that I really like on
Hmm.
Virginia Tech. There's uh Juke Harris, Wake Forest is getting a little bit of love. There's Darian Williams on NC State. And then there's some bigs on teams we've already discussed. Ngongba on Duke,
Hmm.
Veesaar on UNC, who I'm a fan of. Who do you want to hit here?
These are all good options. I'm interested in all of these guys, but let's go with Neo. Let's go to Blacksburg, and
Okay.
talk Hokies here.
Then take me there. Take me there. Why'd you pick him?
Well, he did miss their most recent game against Elon, with not an injury, luckily, but a bit of an illness, I believe. But man, in many ways, he is like, I wouldn't say like my kind of prospect, but is certainly like an archetype that I'm becoming like intrigued by. The sort of like tall, ball handling, the skinny, tall ball handling playmaker.
Hmm.
Um, there feels like there's a couple of these guys like every year. They sort of not all identical, but that come in this sort of like cut now. 6'9", 215, lots of experience playing for various parts of the Greek, national system, junior national system, and then he, of all places, ends up at Virginia Tech, which is a team that program that really invested more financial resources in its basketball team than it has in the last couple of seasons. And um, so far, I think it's not going amazingly well, but there's at least a decent start with him. But for me, with Avdalas, the creativity with the basketball, the passing, the patience operating pick and roll, using his size, using his frame, very good at attacking drop coverage, snaking ball screens, getting to different spots on the floor. There are some limitations finishing. He shot a good ball from three this season, which is certainly like helping, I think, prop up some of these other playmaking pieces of his game. But just to be that height, that size, with this much sort of like international experience already at a young age, and to be sort of like this clever at this one action that is so prevalent and pervasive in the game makes for a really interesting prospect in someone who is changing how Virginia Tech plays. I mean, this isn't this under Mike Young. This is a team that's mostly been like a like rhythm motion offense, and there's still a lot of that. But this is a guy, whether it's more spread pick and roll with Neo, or they like running these sort of like design post actions where they throw it to him in the sort of like mid post, run split action out of it, and then let him like make a play or make a read is is like pretty like heady stuff and stuff for um a young prospect that I think speaks to potentially his ability to like maybe not fully like build an offense around, but be a guy who is contributing playmaking at a high level to an NBA offense. So I like him. I'm intrigued. I want to see more. And yeah, he's a guy that I'm pretty liked seeing what I saw with him play for the Greek junior teams before this season, but like even yesterday, I finally went back and watched his game against Providence and just the
Oh,
shot
that's the one where
making that
he went crazy. Like
he went.
before they college teams were game planning for him. Yeah, he went
Yes,
nuts. Yeah.
yes, he went nuts, and the shot making was crazy from multiple levels of the court. At the rim, mid-range pull-ups, snaking ball screens, getting different spots, and the three-point shooting also on and off the catch, also very good in that outing.
Yeah, he is who I would have chosen as well. Uh I let's see. Neo. I think Jaeger Joman is the one who's going to come to mind most recently for most people, I would think, as a similar size, as a, foreign-born prospect across the pond who has a lot of talent for playmaking with a little bit of uncertainty as to where his sort of consistent scoring and shot making is going to come from. Uh, Yegor, I think, has surpassed my expectations, certainly has probably surpassed a lot of other expectations in terms of already finding a defensive role for himself for Brooklyn, allowing that playmaking to really shine. And a real concern for Yegor coming into this season was how he was going to like just score inside the arc because against like really high level competition for BYU last year, he wasn't very good at it. Uh, but lo and behold, the NBA, as it does, tends to make guys with some finishing concerns look better quickly because they just have more space.
Mhm.
And it makes playmakers look better very quickly because you have NBA level play finishers reacting to your stuff. And so Jaeger has gotten a nice little bump. I think that Neo could have a similar bump for whatever limitations exist in sort of his statistical profile right now. For example, his like rim rate is not very good. And I there can be reasons for that in terms of the offensive personnel that he's playing with. It can also be sort of an approach thing for him because when I watch him, I see him sort of like if there's not a play to make, he's not going to waste time. He's just going to get off the ball. If he thinks that the paint looks clogged or if they're shading too much help his way, he just gets off the ball and sometimes he doesn't get it back. Other times I think you know, there is a it's funny that we're following Mikel with him because Mikel has the more traditional like high recruit
Hmm.
guard like scoring instinct where he's
Hmm.
like, I'm a quote unquote alpha on the ball. And so I am going to show you all this scoring I can do from all over the court. Like I'm coming for your throat kind of a thing. Uh, Avdalas is not that way, to put it, bluntly. And I'd like to see a little more out of him. I think
Hmm.
that Abdallas has shown like better defensive awareness and better defensive movement than Brown Jr. has.
Hmm.
But I think that he like though he will position his body correctly, he doesn't like frequently go for the deflection or go for the block or go for like finishing a play. On offense, he has all this height and he gets pretty good elevation on his jumper and it's not going to like really be blocked by anybody, but I see a reluctance to like embrace mismatches in the post and use the glass or something like
Hmm.
stuff that his frame could lend himself to doing. Because I think Virginia Tech has looked pretty good compared to where they've been in years past. They beat a game Colorado State team, they beat South Carolina on the road in overtime. Like they have a couple nice wins as sort of a mid-tier ACC team so far, but they are still very much in need of like a guy to close games for them. And if Neo's going to be on the ball for them as much as he has been, like he should be that guy. And he's had a couple quotes being like, man, the strength of the game has really surprised me here. The speed of the game has really surprised me here. And so I want to give him an opportunity to to like embrace that scoring mindset a little bit more. But I want him to because I think he can. Like
Hmm.
his playmaking talent and his talent with his handle, like at his size, he should be drawing more free throws. He should be getting to the rim more frequently. Like there's more on the bone here for him to chew on. And I want to see where that takes him. But I am extremely intrigued by him. I could see a situation where I favor him over Mikel Brown, like at the end of the year, but
Hmm.
that's at the end of the year. Like it could also very easily go the other way. But
Sure.
uh, uh, this kid's pass placement is. We
Hmm.
talked before about how Caleb Wilson is like a reactive player, reactive processor more than a proactive one. Abdallas, uh, he and Boozer are both pretty proactive, but like I think that he is probably the best processor of the game off the dribble that we have discussed so far, off of the
Yeah.
dribble.
Yeah. I
And
think.
that is like very high praise because we talked about guys who are going to go in, the top 10, top 5, top 3 in the draft. So that means that by the end of the year, like I sent a tweet out about Neo where he has like a nearly 30% assist rate and he has a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. And for
Hmm.
guys who are 6'6" and taller, freshmen, he's also like a full year younger than Mikel Brown. He mentioned is already 20. Neo
Hmm.
turns 20, I think, in May of next year or something like that. Like 6'6" freshman, 6'7". You mentioned he's 6'9", listed at 6'9". Like they just are not that efficient as passers. It does not happen. There is real special talent there. So there's a real possibility that he is the best passer in this draft.
Hmm.
And we'll see if that's where it ends up, but like the eye test supports it in my opinion and the numbers do too. So I am leaving my heart open to like Neo Abdalas, like top 10 or lottery pick. I think it's very possible. A lot still to be shown, but I think it's possible.
The live ball, live dribble passing is really good. Really, really good. You mentioned some of the rim numbers. Just for context, he's drawing 4.2 fouls per 40 minutes, which is not it's not like terrible, but compared to the guys we've discussed, like Boozer, Wilson, Brown are all like
Well, they're in
all
outer
they're
space,
all
yeah.
like close to like if not above 7 fouls drawn per 40 minutes. And for a guy like Abdallas, this is according to CBB analytics, but just 1.5 field goal attempts per game at the rim. That's about 13% of his total field goal attempts. Those are shots that are inside 4.5 feet from the rim. So very, very, very low number. He's shooting a decent percentage on those, 78%, which is good, but low number. He's taken a lot of twos from outside the paint. About a quarter of his shots this season, 24.4% have been twos from outside the paint. He's shooting a pretty good ball on those, 39.5%, which is helping, kind of just like keep his stabilize his offense. Those are obviously the shots of like a star player, which is kind of interesting. Like that is the province of stars in the
Hmm.
NBA. So yeah, there is, with him, maybe there is some like star upside, star potential in
Well,
terms of his creation bet because 6'8", 6'9", with that passing ability off the dribble, he's young, he can shoot it from different levels of the court. And again, his like craft and touch scoring in the mid range speaks to someone who I don't want to sort of like misconstrue your initial point, but should be able to actually like scale up a little bit, should be able to do even more from like an aggressive scoring standpoint with the basketball as the year progresses with the Hokies.
yeah, I mean it is why I mentioned Yegor. I like they're not obviously the same player. No two players are the same, but intuitively, I find it hard to believe that someone who is this level of a live dribble playmaker and this level of a live dribble processor does not understand that the rim is where you should be taking most of your
Mhm.
shots. Like I believe that Neo understands that. And I think that for whatever reason, whether it's part of his just transition to this league or playing in this country or whatever, or maybe he's just playing and he like sees a lot of like junk in the lane and he's like that is not like that's likely not to end well right now. Like I want something a bit more sophisticated. I want to generate a more open look, or I think we could get to a more open look if I kick it back out. Like I think it's more likely that than a lack of understanding. And once he's in the NBA, his lanes are going to be so much freer because he's probably going to have a five who can shoot that that's where I see the sort of amplification. The rim
Mhm.
is going to become much more available to him. So, yeah, among the guys that we've spoken about, I think that the transition to the pros can have like pretty immediate benefits to him that are surprising relative to maybe some of the other guys. That's what I
Yeah.
believe.
And like he obviously still is like a big time source of rim pressure through his passing too. Like
Hmm.
we've talked about sort of like his cunning, his expertise, his skill in those looks, but also averaging 3.6 rim assists per 40 minutes this season, which is in the 98th percentile nationally. It's about 55% of his assists this year have been rim finishes. And like I mean, I like how like Virginia Tech is leaning into Amani Hansberry as sort of like a small ball five.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, Toby Lawal, who's the one of the best, front court athletes in the country, he's missed a bunch of games. He's only played in 6 games for Virginia Tech. Just like him with a little bit more of like a lob, like an above the rim lob threat in the pick and roll game could also just open up more drives for him too, as a kind of player who might be able to like collapse defenses. Again, Hansberry has been a really nice pick and roll partner for him this season, but I think having whether it's more of a pick and pop threat to sort of like stretch the defense towards towards the arc and away from the rim, or a five that can give you that like vertical threat or those are also things that could help like open the floor for him a little bit more as a driver. And they just Tech doesn't quite have that because Hansberry's wants to pick and pop and shoot, but isn't like great at doing that. And they don't really have the sort of like 7 foot lob bot, on the roster that will be at his disposal on the next level too.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Hansberry kind of reminds me a bit of EJ Liddell when he was
Yeah,
back at Ohio State in
yeah.
terms of just like absolute tank, winner, great rebounder,
Mhm.
heady defender. But yes, he likes to occupy areas of the floor that would also be well suited to, apply to Neo in driving lanes, if he
Yep,
cleared out of the way a little bit.
yep,
So,
yep, yep.
uh, okay, how about I would say I could pair Juke Harris and Paul McNeil as
Hmm.
sort of similar
Yeah.
kinds of a perimeter player, or we could talk about Ngongba and Veesaar. Which two would you like to compare and contrast?
Ooh, these are two. Wow, this is a tough selection. I because I really like all four of these guys quite a bit, and I have thoughts on all of them. But let's go with I think there's maybe a little bit more meat on the bone for Pat Gungba and Henry Veesaar than there is for Juke Harris. I feel bad going away from Juke and Paul, two guys from the state of North Carolina who are experiencing, fun sophomore year bumps. But let's go with the two fives from Duke and UNC.
Okay. Then I will say very briefly that I need to be sold a little bit on Gungba.
Hmm.
Uh, I know he has a lot of fans. I've seen him in the top 10 in like on certain boards of people I respect.
Hmm.
I can understand the appeal in that he does a little bit of everything. Certainly has some shooting touch, reads the floor pretty well within that Duke system. Uh, and has like really nice finishing numbers. Like I get it. But when I've watched him, especially when I watched him against like Flory Badonga against Kansas, or when they played Michigan State with, they always have a solid rebounding front line. Like I haven't seen him, or they played Florida, he'll
Hmm.
have his moments in these matchups against these front courts, but I've not seen him really dominate anybody, in my opinion. And I've seen him like lose his share of physical battles. On the contrary, Veesaar, I love Veesaar. I can't quit Veesaar. I can't imagine myself quitting Veesaar as a 7 footer who screams a lot, but also can run a 4-5 pick and roll and
Hmm.
run high low like they like to do at UNC, but also stretch and shoot threes and finish like all these different kind of dunks on these different lobs. I think Veesaar presents a very underrated and appealing package. I think these two are very close to one another as prospects, frankly. And I would like to know if I am really like missing a dimension of Gungba's game and if I need to take a shower when it comes to Veesaar.
I think maybe if anything with Pat, you're underrating the playmaking components of his game a little bit, in part because like as you know, the assist numbers this season are what they are. They're not bad, they're pretty good. Had 5 assists against Florida, 17% assist rate this year. I kind of thought they'd get a little bit more out of him as like a hub this season. And I think they're still I think they're still working on figuring out the best ways to like pair Gungba and Cam Boozer because
Hmm.
they're different players. There's some redundancy. Um, but I just don't think they're in many ways it's a really like cool, fun duo, but I'm not sure their skills sort of like perfectly complement one another, even though there's like a lot of great ways that you can utilize and apply those guys together. Um, I was expecting Pat to be like physically he has almost underwhelmed me a little bit this season.
Yes,
I
Brian.
I
Yes,
don't
keep
think
keeping this energy. Come
I
on.
don't think he has moved as well as I know he lost weight after last season. Um, but to me, I sometimes worry that like he lost weight, lost some of the power he had last season, and like the the sort of like mobility hasn't come along with the sort of like lighter Ngongba. I don't know if that's true. That's just like sort of like how I've like felt or worried about it maybe. Um there are these flirtations with him as like a pick and pop five, and he's empowered to shoot him. He's taken 15 of them so far this season. I think there's a chance that could be a piece of his game, and maybe that's an important one. Um, I really do like his like face up passing in those like five out looks. Duke plays with him at the wing or at the elbow a lot. This sort of like five out approach that they've um that's become like pretty popular in the NBA. Will Hardy and Utah are sort of like some of the trailblazers of using it, and Duke has was an early adopter in college. And I think Pat is pretty good at picking out cutters. When Duke gets into their split game, he can be a handoff hub. Like he has the ability, even if the like raw assist numbers aren't totally there. Um, I think you could run a college offense through him. But there are these concerns, I think, with him where even though he's blocking shots at a pretty good clip this season and 7% rate, and maybe that's where some of the like improved physical components of his game are showing up, or is on the defensive side of the court as a rim protector, and he can be pretty good in that regard at times. But I think there are worries for a five who right now, fairly low confidence that he's going to become like a true like, pick and pop, quick trigger five.
Hmm.
Um, is not like an above the rim lob catcher. And while he does have the ability to like play make from the high post and be a threat in terms of that, like how many fives get to do that at the NBA who aren't offering you like something else, I guess, is maybe a way of a poor way of getting to it. But just like I'm kind of curious to sort of like see what his role looks like in the NBA, because he doesn't really offer you these sort of like discrete skills like the lob catching and the potential to like maybe pick and pop that you might want with a five. Um and I'm not sure if how much opportunity he'll get to just like be a guy that you're running offense through if he's also not giving you uh starter level quality defense or starter level quality like finishing around the basket. So I like Gongbo a lot. Coming into the season, I was like very excited for him. I was high on him. I've probably lost a little bit of steam with him as a prospect, though I still like him quite a bit. Um, but I've definitely like taken a little bit of a hit with him. As far as Veesaar goes, I wrote a piece about him this offseason for Swish Theory, which I felt pretty good about. Really liked what I saw from him on tape at Arizona last year, and he's just been a beast at UNC. And it's a good setup for him to play fast and for them to like really target the paint, keep him back in drop coverage, guarding pick and roll. But it's not like the situation is like ideal where like he's getting to play with like, four shooters around him at all times and some like amazing breakdown point guard to just like table set for him. Like Kyan Evans is okay. He's also having to play next to a lot of guys that are like shaky shooters at best. Jaron Stevenson, Seth Trimble, Caleb Wilson. And even then, he's still been a beast getting downhill. Like he's been awesome as a roller this season for UNC.
Hmm.
Um, I wouldn't say he's like a full like hub. Like he does not have the Gongba sort of like face up passing component in my view, but he is someone that can make reads, can deliver stuff. You can throw it to him, and he can give you some handoffs and some playmaking out of that. But just would stop short of calling him a hub. Um, but he has also shown the ability to step out and hit threes. We saw him flirt with it at Arizona last season. He's leaned into it a little bit more at UNC. and that can help him also work as a passer too. So I'm into Veesaar for a guy with his size, mobility, aggression, and to be that kind of like threat as a screener because he can get downhill on the roll or pop is really impactful. He's older, obviously, too. I mean, this is a guy that, probably could be in the NBA tonight, as like a
But
guy
he
in the
is
roster.
21, I think, Veesaar,
Okay.
which is
Uh,
not like,
super duper.
especially in the NCAA now, he's probably more like a median age than anything else.
It's fair.
But yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's true. I guess I was thinking he is like 4 years. I think he's 4 years out of because he redshirted a year at Arizona too. So he must have just been pretty young when he came over from Estonia. But
Okay. Okay.
um, but for Pat, obviously, Ngongba is still just I believe he doesn't turn 20 until February, like middle of the season, late season.
Oh, I
So
didn't know that. So he must
so
have been really young as well last
yeah.
year. Yeah.
Yeah. So there is that. There's a bit of an age difference there. So I don't know. I really like Pat, but again this season I was just expecting a little bit more from him as like specifically as like a playmaker. And I just feel like I'm missing a little bit from him on that side of the court.
Well, it might go back a little bit to like you don't want to call Boozer a ball stopper because he's too good of a passer for that to apply. But
Mhm.
if he is getting into his lab on the block, either Gungba's setting some flare or exit screen elsewhere on the floor as either a dummy action or to give Boozer
Mhm.
an option to sling the ball. And not going to get much credit in the box score for doing that stuff, but I do like the way Gungban moves, and I do think he sets good screens. But whenever we talk about this situation where you're not a pogo stick athlete and
Mhm.
you're 6'10, you're not 7 foot or 7'1. I think about the 2020 draft because that had Onyeka Kongwu and Isaiah Stewart, both of whom have
Mhm.
hit and gotten second contracts and play big roles for in Isaiah's case, an excellent team, and in
Yeah.
Okongwu's case, a team that lots of people always think is going to be excellent. So there's something to be said for that. But with those two, the trait that they share, I mean, they're different players. Isaiah is like a plus 6 or 7 wingspan guy. He has like a 7'4" wingspan and might make an all defense team this year because his rim deterrent numbers have been so good for like multiple years running. Okongwu is more of that undersized guy from a length perspective as well. But he was just a physical monster as a freshman at USC. Like,
Mhm.
was always the strongest, most explosive guy on the court in any game that he played. And that's really the challenge for an undersized five like Gungba. It's can you overwhelm in some capacity your counterparts physically? Can you do that? If you can, then I think that there's absolutely a spot in the NBA for him. But if he cannot do that at present, then I think he might be better served hanging around Duke maybe for another year, just putting himself in the best physical condition that he possibly can. Like
Mhm.
we talked last year a couple times about Malawach and how he was not necessarily like physically dominant yet, and Duke was trying to toughen him up in a bunch of different ways. But Malawach is 7'2" with a 7'6" wing. Like there's just so much to work with there
Mhm.
that again the margin for error is very, very wide. And that the concern with Gungba is just that it's too narrow for him right now, and there's got to be some sort of physical development, or he's got to start hitting threes. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
What the two two more quick things on Gungba. Like he I don't want to label him as like completely like a below the rim guy. Like he gets a lot of dunks. They do like to throw it to him on these lobs. A similar play that they would throw to Malwatch last season, where he sets a wide pin down for Isaiah Evans. Evans curls to the middle of the floor. If you get two on the ball, then the five's open on the dive. Knipple and Proctor would hit Malwatch on this play fair amount last season. And Gongba, if he has sort of like time and space, like he can, a little bit of a runway, he can get up and catch a lob. he's drawn a fair amount of fouls, like going for lobs this season. That's just been one of the ways he's been able to draw some contact. So it's like he does give you some of that. It's like some he can be like a bit of a pressure point on the rim in some of these like dive situations, but ultimately that's not the kind of like five that he's gonna be. Like he's the guy that you want to like again, funnel some of the offense through him. And he's not just setting, 100 ball screens per game. Like he's
Right,
facing up at the
right, right, right.
elbow. Guys are cutting off of him. And to me, he's at his best passing when the guys are cutting to the basket as like a like face up passer with guys cutting in on those angles. He can be clever leading players. He sees stuff before they develop. He can throw guys open. Um, I would that not to circle back fully, but just like the one thing I've wanted to see more from Duke this season is for them to get into more of their cut game in the half court. I think that's a way for them actually to get Dame Sar going, who's had certainly a rough start offensively. And Ngongba is sort of like the guy to like lean into in terms of like finding Isaiah Evans as a cutter, finding Sar as a cutter, finding Boozer as a cutter. Um, and he only took one shot in the game against Texas Tech. He made it, but in 21 minutes, only one shot. Five free throw attempts, a handful of assists. Now, Texas Tech, when Gongba was playing with Malik Brown and some of their like double center lineups, like they just double teamed him on the post and just refused to let him get a post up touch. Um, but obviously just one shot for him in 21 minutes is not enough. I do think Duke is going to more than maybe anyone else on the roster. Like he is the guy that they're going to be looking to find ways to kind of get him going more in conference play. And I do think they're going to try to look to find more ways to like get him in the low post too, as opposed to having whatever the majority of his touches. I mean, the majority of his touches are always going to be in the high post, but maybe can you like move the ratio around and find ways to give him more looks in the mid post, in the dunker spot, in the low post, and play out of that. And maybe that's a way to kind of even get him going as a scorer and a playmaker.
Well, it depends on their priorities, I suppose, because then you're turning Boozer into more of an off-ball player. If you're doing that, I actually think that could benefit Boozer in the long run because I
Yeah.
think his off-ball game is going to need to be like we talked about at the top with sort of these narrower margins, and it seems like every other facet of his game is going to have to be very, very polished. And they've run Boozer like around screens on like baseline out of bounds plays for threes in the corner. Like
Mhm.
he's comfortable doing it to an extent, so maybe he would embrace that as a bit more of his diet. But it's also I could just as easily see them saying, you know, is that taking half a step back for two steps forward? Is that something we really want to do? But
the,
that,
the,
you know,
they're in a weird spot too because they don't like there are good guards on this team, but they don't. I mean, like Caleb Foster is like a nice ACC guard. Caden Boozer I think could be a decent NBA prospect. At some point in his career too. But they don't even have the sort of like Sion James like caretaker straight line
hmm
driver.
hmm
Foster's kind of doing that to an extent. And so Duke really has to like orient its offense top down and like, invert things and play through Gongba and Boozer and Malik Brown, all of whom are like excellent, front court playmakers who can pass and be hubs, but it's an interesting roster, you know what I mean? Because they don't really have just sort of like a pure point guard, pure breakdown guy to just sort of like set those guys up. So when they want to like play make through them or like find easy looks for the other guy, they really have to like again just like play through the 4 and 5. And it's been good so far, but probably not as good as they needed to be this year.
Okay. Yeah. I also wanted to mention on Veesaar before we moved on because I just spoke about him for a second. I he was surprised to learn. I mentioned before that I liked how he was able to finish around the rim and how I think he has underrated coordination on alley oops. Like he's
Mhm.
not, Kalkbrenner has sort of perked my antenna up to this skill because Kalkbrenner is shooting like 77% from the field or whatever he
It,
is
it,
for
it's
your Hornets.
it's insane. Yeah.
But Veesaar is not that. He doesn't have Kalkbrenner's dimensions. He's not going to be ACC Defensive Player of the Year the way Kalkbrenner was 4 times in the Big East. But
Hmm.
I think he does have good coordination on those rim finishes.
Definitely.
And Caleb Wilson, you mentioned, was the NCAA's dunk leader at 35. I think is what he's got is 35. Veesaar has 27 dunks already, which, like, I think Veesaar's like an okay athlete at 7 feet, but I didn't like if you were to have asked me how many dunks you think, I would have thought he had like half of that, like maybe
Mhm.
around 15 to 20. So if he somehow throws up like a 60 to 70 dunk season or something like that, that puts him not in elite company, but very, very solid company if you believe at all that the 3-point shooting is real. But he's engaged on both ends. Again, like I said, not the most explosive guy, but has decent dimensions and is high effort and generally like knows where to be, and I think can find a spot in the league. So I like
Mhm.
Vesar.
Yep, I like him too. The size, shooting, aggression component, um, just feels like it's a ticket to like a rotation spot, you know.
Yeah.
And the fact that he can pass a little bit too, so really good player. And I'm not surprised. I thought his even sort of like in the I live in Raleigh, like even in the sort of like triangle media sphere, I it did kind of feel like his recruitment to UNC was like not under the radar because people it was a big deal, but like I don't think people were fully engaged with how good he could be with just sort of like a larger role that he was going to be able to step into in Chapel Hill.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't even realize that that was where he ended up. I actually figured that Arizona would want to retain him based on
Yeah.
how he played there last year, but that's the market.
Yeah.
Um, okay. Brian, I like there's still plenty that we could talk about here. NC State has multiple prospects that people
Hmm.
like. Matt Abel, McNeil, Darian Williams. Uh, mentioned Juke Harris before. There's a couple other bets throughout the conference, but I think the best thing to do would be to table them
Hmm.
for another day because I think we've been going probably around 2 hours. But is there anything else uh, that has caught your eye, especially where like you think there might be a first rounder here or something like that that you want to get to, want to make sure that you get to?
I think for the most part we've touched on the I guess the one guy in this we're gonna need to sort of like go into this with more detail at a later date and time, but we should mention Ibuka Okori from
Mm-hmm.
Stanford. He's probably one of the guys that's probably like risen the most. He did miss a couple of games
He
last
went
week.
18 of 21 from the line against Colorado the other
Colorado,
night. Yeah.
insane. And if I randomly saw him play at Brewster Academy in high school because he was teammates with Sebastian Wilkins, who's redshirting at Duke this season. They played against the Boozer twins in Columbus High late last season, and he was awesome in the game. And I kind of like couldn't believe he was like a 3-star, 4-star going to Stanford. And he's lit it up. I mean, he's been one of the best guards in the ACC so far this season. The 3-point shot a little up and down, but his burst and the finishing skills he has around the basket, like he's getting into the paint, turning the corner, getting downhill, getting to the line at an incredible rate to drawing almost 8 fouls per 40 minutes, a lot of them of the shooting variety. Um, he deserves some recognition, and even though he plays in the out in the Bay Area, like far away from Tobacco Road, he still deserves a tip of the cap here. And we should go into more into him along with the State and Wake guys at a future date too, because there's in Sheldon Henderson at Miami, like there's a lot of
Hmm.
guys to touch on, but I would say Corey has been just flat out one of the best sort of like freshman guards in the country. And his offensive package has been outstanding. He's gotten a ton of steals too, so he really deserves a little bit of recognition here at the end.
Yeah, he is especially in this draft class, it's very interesting because this is being touted as such a monumental, like undersized guard class. I will confess my skepticism on that front. I don't think such a thing exists anymore in the NBA. This isn't
Yeah.
the first draft to be like, there's 14 point guard prospects in this class. That usually just means that there are point guards who are having good seasons in college, but the NBA realities are the NBA realities. And I think Okori is listed at 6'2", maybe
Hmm.
6'3", but he definitely, you can see that he is undersized. And so when you get, whoever is Tyler Tanner on Vanderbilt is a
Hmm.
very good undersized guard. Acuff, I think, qualifies as an undersized guard. Flemings is skinny and slight, but is has rocket boosters on his feet. Like the whenever this is already the framework, when there is yet another guy who fits that mold, then I think he is going to go under discussed because even people who believe in this being a landmark undersized guard draft are like, well, yeah, and another one. Like
Hmm.
maybe not seven NBA players here who all fit this same archetype,
Yeah.
but if a Corey plays the best, and he clearly is assuming a massive offensive burden, you mentioned the steals, like it is not like a Mikel Brown situation, in my opinion, where he's only really putting in the effort on one side of the floor. Like he moves extremely well, extremely fluidly, and I am looking forward to discussing him more because I think there's a chance that with some of those names that I just listed off, that Okori is better than them, but time will tell. Uh, what should the people look forward to on Split the Action and on Buzzbeat?
Yes, split the action. My Substack page, briangeisinger.substack.com. If you're interested, please subscribe. There's all kinds of ACC coverage, whether it's sort of like X and O breakdowns. I do all kinds of charting and playbook data and information, mostly on like the Tobacco Road teams, but I've done a lot on Louisville and Virginia this season, who look two promising teams as well. I'm contributing to Basket Under Review, which is like the sort of like Trilly Donovan college hoops dedicated site that was launched earlier this year that is also attached to the Trilly Donovan Discord. I've written several pieces there, including one that went live this past week on Virginia and a really good freshman guard
Nice.
they have this season, Chance Mallory, who
Yeah.
putting up numbers like a prospect, but at 5'9", 185 pounds, maybe we'll have to table those next level discussions, but has been amazing for them so far this year. I'm contributing at Swish Theory, which is a site that you and I have some friends that are also in the mix over there. So wrote pieces on Malik Thomas at San Francisco, Henri Veesaar at UNC, and then Buzzbeat really we're just chronicling the Con Knipple rookie season. It's really like what it's uh what it's coming down to. But no, an exciting draft class with several darts on the roster, right? I mean, Kalkbrenner, Sion James, those
Yeah.
guys are having starting games in the NBA playing well. Liam McNeely has not been amazing, but has had some moments. But just that's a weekly Charlotte Hornets podcast. I think it's the best Hornets coverage out that you can find out in the public sphere. You can follow that at any podcast app you listen to. And again, those are sort of like X and O breakdowns, numbers heavy, but I think we have good fun too. And because we're covering the Hornets, it's sort of always draft season, so we talk prospects there a fair amount, especially once the calendar starts to get to the spring. We'll be doing a lot of draft scouting stuff there as well.
Oh man. I that's very exciting, wonderful to hear. I I would not mind seeing Caleb Wilson stay in state, be
He
be
he
a lot
would
of fun.
be he would be a really especially because the four spot for them is just like
Yeah.
calling, or like the forward spot is really calling out for like, I mean, I'd be pretty excited to see Boozer there as well, sort of a different kind of player, but either one of those guys would be very exciting for the Hornets, and we'll see. I mean, we're going to be doing a lot of LaMelo watch too, I think, especially once the off season comes around. Like if this is someone who's going to be traded, if so, what for, and what does that sort of like mean for the overall arc of the franchise? And but we'll be there to document it all. We are dead enders, and I've been doing that podcast for almost 10 years now. And the Hornets have played in a grand total of zero playoff games since
Uh,
we started it. But it's a new day in Charlotte with the ownership and front office. So
but you've only had me on once. That's the problem, and
we
that
got to
was
do
years
that.
ago. And I
We got
think
to
with like the next year that you played in a play-in game. So what is the universe telling you there,
we got to do more. We got to get more Chuck. We need more darts
That's
on
right.
Busby. We will definitely be tapping your services. Because honestly, we should do like a con check-in. You and I should do like a con debrief on one of those episodes, because we were both fans of his, big fans of his heading into the draft, and he's had a splendid rookie year. So
You
he's
know,
worth,
Charles Lee better watch his back. They could just play or coach him with some of
yeah,
these, post games that he's given. But
it's
no, like
incredible.
I'm gonna get too worked up. All right.
Yeah.
Uh Brian Geisinger, thank you so much. Uh at it's Brian.Geisinger uh on Blue Sky,
Yep.
correct? B Geis
Yes.
Bird on
Yes.
Twitter.
Yep.
Split the Action, Buzzbeat. Thank you so much. Thank you all very much for listening. This has been Chucking Darts. It's okay to be wrong about sports. Find your dartboard and start chucking. Thank you. And happy holidays.